All right. Well, welcome to the Private Practice Elevation Podcast, Lee.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being willing to do this. I know we're kind of in crazy times, and I'm just super excited to connect with you. We were talking before we hopped on, and I've been following you on Instagram. I don't even remember how I came across your stuff, but yeah, just you put out really great content, and just excited to share what you're doing with my audience. So welcome.
Thank you. And thank you so much. I've been a fan of yours for a while as well, following you on Instagram. And it's funny how you kind of develop these connections with people and then you try to trace it back. And it's like, how did this even begin? I don't even remember.
Yeah. It could be like one post that someone shared, someone shared this person's post who shared this person's post or whatever. But now I know that you make homemade pretzels. I think I saw the other day.
Yes, that's how I'm getting through the stay-at-home order is using what little yeast I have left to bake pretzels and all sorts of good stuff.
That's awesome. And I think I said that's my kryptonite. I love soft baked pretzels. My wife gets them at Trader Joe's, and that's like my treat. It's my gluten treat.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, I always like to start out by hearing a little bit more, about my guests. And I'm a big Marvel Universe person. Love comic books. I always love the origin story of the hero. So, tell us a little bit more about, basically. Well, first start with what do you do right now, and then let's hear a little bit more of your story of how you got to where you are today, doing what you're doing.
Okay, so my name is Lee Chaix McDonough. I am the founder and CEO of Coach with Clarity, which is a business coaching and coach training company. So over time, I really developed this niche of helping professionals like therapists, physicians, public health professionals, and kind of creative, intuitive types leverage their existing skill set and their experiences into a successful coaching career. So that's kind of where I've landed. But in terms of origin story, I am trained as a clinical social worker and public health professional. So I have a dual degree in social work and public health from the University of North Carolina. So I'm a Tar Heel. And I got interested in psychology and human behavior when I was about 15 years old. And my grandmother introduced me to the Enneagram and to Myers-Briggs. And so
Wow.
15-year-old Lee was just like all over that. She just thought that was so interesting. And that's really where my love and my fascination of human behavior started. And ultimately what led me to pursue psychology and drama in undergrad, and then eventually went into social work and public health.
Wow, that's awesome to get introduced to something like that at such an early age. I think I learned about Enneagram probably like, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that. I'm 38 right now, so I'm coming into it a little bit later. But yeah, love the Enneagram. My wife and I geek out on that all the time.
It's just fascinating, isn't it? And it has had a bit of a resurgence in the last 5 years. I was introduced to it. Yeah, I guess if I was 15, I'm 40, so that would have been in the early 90s. And my family
Wow.
approached it from a religious perspective because the Enneagram is actually pretty well known within Catholic circles, and I was raised
Hmm.
Catholic, and so that was how I was introduced to it through the work of Richard Rohr, who is a
Yep.
Jesuit priest. But then I kind of like took it maybe a little more secular, and but introduced it to my friend group. And I think it really gave me a lens through which to understand myself and the people in my life and the world around me, which at 15, let's be honest, like it can feel really confusing and
Yeah.
overwhelming. So to have a system to refer to was really comforting for me. And I think ultimately why I really went into this profession in the first place. It's always made sense
Yeah.
to me.
That's awesome. What number are you?
I am a 2 with a hardcore 3 wing.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, solid 2 with a 3 wing. How about you?
I am a 9. I forget which wing I am though, but I am like textbook 9, peacemaker,
Hmm.
quiet. Yeah, when I read like the descriptions, I'm like, oh man, that's like so me. And I know this episode is not about Enneagram, but it's just fun to geek out on. But so when I first learned that and I did the test and everything, I was like, oh man, like I kind of had this feeling of like, oh, that puts me at a disadvantage because I'm a peacemaker, or like, like somebody says something and I agree with them, and then someone over here says something and I agree with them too, but I've come to like make more sense of it, over time, and just see the strengths in my personality and what I do.
That's so interesting because my background as a therapist is in acceptance and commitment therapy. I used to work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I completed a 6-month traineeship in ACT. And I always wanted to be a 9 or to have more 9 qualities, because that idea of detachment and of kind of being present without necessarily getting too attached to something, I've always associated that with a 9.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I see that as being a real superpower. I bet it really serves you in your practice as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it definitely does. Well, I'm not a therapist myself, but my wife is a therapist. But what I do, when I listen to people talk about their challenges in their business and like how can a website, help them,
Mhm.
sometimes it can get like, emotional where someone's in a very like struggling place, or I tried this thing, I tried that thing, blogging doesn't work, or advertising doesn't work, or my website isn't working, and I can take all that information and just kind of process it and just kind of sit with it,
Yeah.
and sometimes I'll come back to people after a conversation like, I was thinking about your issue, your challenge, and here's what I think might be, going on. It just takes me a little time to process it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it's just, isn't it fascinating how when we understand kind of our tendencies, it just makes sense in terms of looking at how we operate and then how other people operate too. I just
Yeah.
I just love it.
Yeah. Okay. So segue us into what we're going to be talking about today with coaching. So, yeah, I'll leave it up to you to segue that. How does Enneagram come into coaching and bring this all together for us?
Definitely does. So I practiced as a social worker and as a therapist for almost 15 years. And my husband was in the Air Force. So we moved around a bit, and I actually found social work to be a fairly portable profession. Once I got over all of the licensure stuff, wherever we went, I was able to find work. So
Yeah.
I have done a lot. Actually, I feel really fortunate. I've done inpatient psychiatric work, outpatient psychiatric work. I was a social worker in the neonatal ICU unit, which was a
Wow.
phenomenal job. Yeah. I've worked for the VA, I've worked for the Air Force. I mean, I've been able to do a lot. And then in 2015, my husband and I decided it was the right time for him to leave the Air Force. And we moved back to the States. We had been stationed in Germany, which was a phenomenal assignment. So cool.
Wow.
But when we moved there, it was 2011. My kids were 2 and 4. And so we were moving back. And I just had this sense that the transition might be a little complicated. My kids were essentially like little Germans. That's where they had grown up. And
Yeah.
so I was expecting some serious reverse culture shock or culture shock. So I decided to take a little time off when we moved back to help everyone make the transition. And interestingly, the kids were fine. Like they made that transition no problem. And they loved some of the conveniences in America that we didn't have in Germany. We
Mm.
lived in somewhat of a rural area. So the very first time we ever had pizza delivered to our house in the States, my kids just thought it was the most amazing thing in the
It's
world.
like Christmas.
It felt that way. It was actually my husband and me who needed a little more time making the transition. And for him, it was largely because he had bought a dental practice. And so here he was, this really outstanding periodontist who was so good with his patients and just this excellent surgeon. So he felt really competent in this one area, but he had never owned a business before. That's
Right.
not something they teach you in dental school or in the Air Force. And so he was trying to learn the ropes and figure it all out. And there's this really unique tension that happens when you are extraordinary in one area and a novice in the other. And it started bringing up a lot of mindset issues and, can I do this? Do I have what it takes?
Yeah.
Who am I to do this? All that
Yeah.
mindset stuff that therapists are really comfortable with.
Hmm.
And that's when my wheels started turning. I was observing it as his partner, as his spouse, but that clinician side of me kept thinking, I've seen this before.
Right.
And I knew that there were other people out like him out there that I wanted to help, and that therapy wasn't necessarily the modality they needed or wanted. And so as I did my research, that's when I discovered business coaching. And I thought, okay, so here's a way that I can help people with their mindset and also create strategic action plans to help them take the steps they want in their business. How do I do this?
Yeah.
That's when I started researching, and I finished a coach training program, started my own business. And the more I worked with helping professionals, especially therapists, the more my clients became interested in the art of coaching as well. And they wanted to know more about, how do I do this? How do I become a coach?
Yeah.
And that's what to where I am now, which is really going to lead on coach training, especially for mental health professionals and other helper healer types.
That's awesome. That's why I love origin stories, because it's always like, from the outside looking in, it looks like this natural progression. Oh yeah, and then I did this, and then, this happened, and we moved home from Germany, and I'm sure in the midst of it, like, there was so much time, there was so much planning and work that had to be done. But when you look back, it's always just so amazing to me. Like, I'm always just blown away how, the universe, God, whatever it is, like, just really leads your path. And I totally relate to that story, because I was kind of, my wife is in private practice, she's a therapist, I launched my own business in 2016. And I was so blindsided by the mindset stuff,
Yeah.
that, oh wow, like this insecurity is still here, or I don't know how to do this. And all of these things that you're doing for the first time, like, that's a huge piece. So that's amazing that you're able to see that with your husband and kind of transition that into helping other people in the same boat. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think what I didn't expect is that the process, the journey that I was on from moving from therapy into coaching, certainly there was the professional piece, but there was such a personal piece too. There was my
Yeah.
own self-development, my own discovery of aspects about myself that I didn't even know about, that had been dormant. And that was exciting. It was scary. And I think, just as with any superhero story, we make progress and then an obstacle comes up that sets us back,
Yeah.
and we have to recalibrate and figure out. That's certainly been a part of my journey as well. But
Yeah.
we need those moments, because that's what, brings us to where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that there's a lot of people probably listening that are thinking about doing something similar as what you've
Mhm.
done, moving into coaching from therapy. I've worked with a number of clients who have done that, or are trying to do that, launching podcasts, trying to reach more people with coaching and making that transition. So I would love it if you could just share, some advice, some steps, some tips, things that you learned from your journey on how someone else can make a similar transition.
I would be more than happy to. I think first, I would recommend that therapists who are interested in moving into coaching, either partially or fully, get really clear on who they want to serve as a coach and how that differs from who they are serving as a therapist. There is a lot of potential for blurred lines and blurred boundaries, and one of the things I think can really keep us from falling into those gray zones or those potential ethical traps is really treating therapy and coaching as two separate businesses with two separate audiences.
Mm,
So if you're a therapist that has a niche in one area, which, highly advised to do that, let's make sure that who you're serving as a coach is different enough so that you can really clearly delineate between the two audiences. And that's also going to ensure that you're using different approaches. It's certainly possible, and in fact, I think preferable, to have your coaching work be informed by your experience as a therapist. There's a way to do that without it becoming therapy, because coaching is its own approach. We have our own way of working with clients that certainly pulls on skills and tools that therapists are going to be very familiar with, but it is a different way of establishing a relationship and interacting with the client. And so we need to really think about that separately, so that this is not just, oh, I'm going to coach so that I can, work with therapy clients who are out of state. Like, that's not why we're going into coaching. We're going into
right.
coaching so we can serve a different population in a different way.
That's good. That's really good advice. And one thing that comes up for me is, I'm just listening to that. If someone's in that transition space, like, they're looking to add coaching, they're starting to, like, define who they want to serve. I always want to bring it back to the website stuff and
Yes.
marketing. So
Yes.
how do you see that working? Like, do you see someone just having a section on their website, or is this like they need to launch a whole new website with a whole new brand? Is it a combination? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. So I think a lot is going to depend on who you're serving and also the regulations for your state license. I know that there are some states out there that are perfectly comfortable with therapists having a separate page on their website for coaching and advertising the two together. My thought is that if you are going to be providing coaching services to clients who do not reside in states where you're licensed, then we could get into some tricky territory if you're marketing it on your therapy website. So in
Gotcha.
general, I take a fairly conservative stance and recommend that
Yeah.
we have two separate websites, two separate marketing plans.
Okay.
Again, that's going to be, there's some wiggle room there based on your state and who you're working with. But I would say, generally speaking, let's treat it like two different businesses, two different websites, two different marketing strategies.
Yeah. Okay. That's good for me to know as someone who creates websites. When someone comes to me and has a page on their website that's all about coaching, like I'm going to send them to you to consult. Okay.
Okay, excellent.
Because I don't know all the ins and outs and, if that's okay, not okay in your state, all that sort of stuff.
No problem. I'm happy to be a resource.
Awesome. Okay. So someone should get very clear on who they're going to serve. What are like the next steps? Like, I mean, you define who you want to serve, and then you still have to
And
kind
then
of
what? Yeah.
create the business, or what happens next? What did you do?
Exactly. Well, I think there's really two things to think about. One is building your coaching mastery, and one is building your business mastery. So the coaching mastery piece, the question that I get a lot from therapists is, do I need a coaching certification? Do I need to complete a coach training program? And for people that don't have experience providing therapy or human services, my answer is yes. You want to complete a coach training program. You want to learn the ins and outs of coaching and how to build those relationships and work with people. But for therapists, my answer is maybe, maybe not. I am a huge proponent of coach specific training, and I think everyone, regardless of their background, should pursue some education about coaching if that's what they want to do. But whether a therapist needs a coaching certification is going to depend largely on who they serve and how important that credential is to their ideal client. So, for example, in the corporate space, in the executive space, having a credential from the International Coaching Federation, or ICF, is considered the gold standard. ICF is the main organization for professional coaches. And so having a credential from them goes a long way with that population. But most therapists I know are not going the corporate coaching track. They're doing life coaching, wellness
Right.
coaching, business coaching. And so their clients may not need or expect that credential, but they do expect to work with someone who understands what coaching is and how to create that coaching relationship.
Right.
That can be done through coaching CEs, through self-study, podcast books. It can be done through working with your own coach. So I think there's other ways that therapists can get that education that may or may not have to include a formal program. Now, I did a formal program just because I'm someone who likes to check all the boxes and get that
Right.
credential. I
Yeah.
have no regrets about doing that program. And in the future, my goal is to create an initial training program that's really targeted for mental health professionals who want to transition in. Right now, I provide continuing coach education through ICF, but I don't yet do that initial training. That's my big picture, big
Yeah.
vision goal. But again, I think as long as therapists are entering into it with the understanding that this is a different approach, there's some nuances to the differences, and that they're really taking the time to understand that, I think that's probably going to be sufficient for most therapists.
Yeah. Well, that's good. And I think too that you want to make sure that you're, at the end of the day, you're serving the people that you want to serve. So I guess in my mind, it's like, you probably shouldn't just up and call yourself a coach without maybe doing a little bit of thought behind this and start, understanding what is the difference between coaching and therapy.
That's my thought too, especially because coaching is a self-regulated profession, which means anyone can call themselves a
Right.
coach. They can just
Right.
put themselves out there. And so there's a low bar to entry for this profession, which is why I feel so strongly about bringing other qualified professionals into the coaching field. I don't think there's anyone who's better suited to be a coach than someone that has a lot of therapeutic training.
Right. Right. Okay. So we talked a little bit about like the coaching mastery. So what about the business side of being a coach? What can you tell us about that?
Yes, so I can tell you that is quite a journey. At least it was for me. When I decided I wanted to become a coach, I didn't really get that I was also signing up for this entrepreneurial lifestyle.
Right.
And that doesn't have to be the case for every coach. Some coaches are internal coaches, meaning that they're hired by an organization to provide coaching within that company. But most of the coaches I know become small business owners.
Yeah.
And so that's those are those muscles that I didn't know I had that I wound up
Yeah.
developing. And what I found was, again, treating it as a separate business from my therapy practice was really important. Creating separate, in my case, a separate LLC was important, creating the websites and so forth. And then also finding ways to engage with my ideal client as a way of building my visibility and my credibility and the level of trust that I had with my community. Because people really do need to see you as an expert, but also as someone who's approachable and someone that they can trust if they're going to
Yeah,
work with you. So
absolutely.
that's a huge piece of the puzzle as well.
Yeah. What has been like your biggest challenge making that transition into the business and the entrepreneurial side of it all?
For me, actually, it's been the mindset piece.
Yeah.
The skill set piece, I'm a bit of a researcher. Like I can go down the Google rabbit hole, no problem. And I really love DIYing projects and figuring things out.
Yeah.
At least so I have a good initial understanding so that when I then decide, let me bring in an SEO expert, let me bring in a copywriter, I have enough of an understanding of how it works so that I can be a part of the process.
Right.
So that piece took some time and some research, but I felt really comfortable with the skill set piece. It was the mindset piece that I really had to do a lot of internal work on. This idea of who am I to be a business owner? I don't have an MBA. I've never done this before. And now
Right.
I'm supporting other people who are doing the same thing. Like, is that okay? Am I allowed to do that? And
Yep.
so it really was a process of giving myself permission to step into that role
Yeah.
and to step into the fact that, yeah, I'm the CEO of my own company and I get to lead it as such. And I have just as much a right to do that for my business as anyone does for theirs. And so that's been the big journey for me, is really stepping into that place of presence and
Yeah.
empowerment.
Yeah, that's good, and it's encouraging for me to hear someone else have similar thought processes to myself. Absolutely, with the mindset stuff, as I said earlier, like that's been the biggest thing for me as a business owner, and that question, that imposter syndrome, pops up all the time. It's something that I still see come up, rear its ugly head, and like, hey, like we're helping people here. Like I'm serving people, and yeah, like I am allowed to do this. It is okay.
Yes. And the thing about mindset work is that it's not a one and done thing either.
Yeah,
In fact,
right,
the more we grow in our businesses and in our lives and the more we expand, in many ways, the more opportunities there are for us to really refine
right.
our mindset. And so last year, I released my first book, which is called Act on Your Business. And it's how I took principles of acceptance and commitment therapy and applied them to the business world. And that's what it's about. It's about when you up level, recognizing that it's going to lead to some positive growth, but it's also going to kind of poke at those inner critic gremlins that we all
Yeah,
have. And that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. If anything, it probably means you're doing it
yeah,
right,
right.
but there's still work to be done around it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've learned to take it as a sign. Like if you're not feeling that struggle, that tension, then you're probably just kind of floating around, just kind of just going with the flow. But if you're really pursuing your dreams and the challenges, that are really going to make that big impact in your business, then there's going to be stuff that comes up because you're doing stuff for the first time. Like you shouldn't be expected to just float through those things.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's just reframing all that stuff,
Hmm.
which some days I reframe better than other days.
I think we all do.
All right, awesome. Well, is there anything else that you want to just share about making that transition from therapy to coaching?
I think I just want people to know that it can be done and that many therapists have done it and are doing it. I know there's a lot of questions and even fears around the legality and the ethics of it. And if you're experiencing that, you're not alone and you're at the right stage. But there is a way where we can move forward and serve a population of people that want support and guidance that looks different from therapy, but can be equally as powerful for both the client and the coach. And that's really what I've committed my work to. I love it. And yeah, it's a really rewarding profession and one that can be done as an adjunct to one's therapy business or as a completely, standalone, like going in 100% with coaching. So there's a lot of
Yeah,
flexibility there as well.
yeah. Well, another question that actually just came to mind is I'm
Mhm.
just curious to hear your thoughts on what you're seeing as far as, the coaching industry and with all of coronavirus and people kind of seems like are, more open to shifting and pivoting in their business. Perhaps there's probably some therapists out there who have seen a huge drop off in the amount of clients they're seeing. What are your thoughts, surrounding our current scenario?
Yes, I think therapists right now are realizing the value of being agile and nimble and being
Yeah.
able to pivot when necessary, and why having multiple revenue streams in one's business is so important, because when one takes a hit, you can turn to this other stream for support.
Yeah.
I'm also seeing therapists who previously were doing primarily face to face work, getting comfortable with telehealth. And one of the things about coaching is that we can serve our clients anywhere at any time through video teleconferencing or through the phone. So, as therapists are becoming more comfortable with telehealth for therapy, I think they're realizing, oh, I can do this for coaching as well.
Yeah.
So, I'm seeing people kind of light up to the idea that, like, maybe this is something I want to pursue. So even in the midst of a really stressful time, like a global pandemic, we can still find opportunity. And I think for therapists, that may mean looking at other ways of building their revenue and serving their people, whether it's through creating a product or whether it's through creating a new service like coaching.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, where can people find out more about you and check out what you're doing?
Well, you can certainly head to my website, which is coachwithclarity.com. And Coach with Clarity is also where you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And for therapists who are looking for a community of other people considering or transitioning to coaching, I run the free From Therapy to Coaching Facebook group. So you can find that on Facebook, and we'd love to have you over there.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all those links in the show notes for this episode as well. Well, thank you so much for your time, Lee. It was great to get to know you and hear your story, and really just appreciate all the expert info that you gave us.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel. It's been a pleasure.